What's up, everybody? So over the past week, the FTC and Microsoft have been in battle with each other to kibosh the acquisition. And in Microsoft case, a lot of things have been exposed, and also Sony have been exposed during this trial. That kind of sheds light on what happens behind the scenes with these big gaming companies. So what we're going to look at today is a summary of all those secrets on display. In IGN, they have summarized a lot of that stuff. So we're going to be looking at them today. 12 surprising reveals from the Xbox FTC trial. I want to say it ended on Friday. They haven't come to a decision. The judge hasn't come to a decision yet, so we'll have to see. And this one is by Logan Plant. We're going to skip all the fluff in the beginning. Xbox admits it lost the console wars. And I remember, I'm not sure if I posted that video, but I did talk about this. The entire Xbox Activision Blizzard saga has been filled with both Microsoft and Sony downplaying their respective achievements to appear as meek as possible. And I would say Sony is a big one in that. The FTC hearing was no exception, as the week kicked off with news of Microsoft claiming Xbox has officially lost the console wars. And I would say they did with the Xbox 360. They came out strong in the beginning, but with the red ring of death affecting so many players, it really left a bad taste in a lot of people's mouths. And Sony, what didn't do any better, because they came out late and they overpriced, well, I wouldn't say overpriced, but they priced their PlayStation 3 super high, which drove people in another direction. But, by the end of that, console war, that generation of console war, PlayStation 3 had come out on top. They had made the PlayStation 3 more accessible. They had a lot of games, they were ramping up their games to go with it. And, with Xbox degrading as they did, PlayStation ended up selling more than Xbox did. So I would say that's when they lost the console war. And they've kind of not been selling as much as PlayStation ever since then. They almost beat them during that generation, but they didn't have what it took to get them over the finish line. Microsoft claimed its original Xbox was crushed by Sony, and Nintendo, which it was, entered the market in 2001, and the company said it's been losing the console wars ever since. Yes, this is true. Citing numbers from 2021, Microsoft said Xbox held a 16% share of console video game market. Good lord, that's tiny. Xbox's Phil Spencer also said a piece of the console wars, calling it a social construct within the community during this testimony. I would say part of it is, for sure, you have gamers on each side saying that their console is better. They have better games, whatever. I don't engage in that kind of rhetoric. I will say what I think PlayStation has superior games, but that's not to denigrate anybody who likes Xbox and their games. I prefer PlayStation. If you prefer Xbox, that's totally fine too. Microsoft says next gen could start in 2028. We're gonna skip that one. Microsoft wanted to scoop up Bungie, Sega, Square Enix, Zynga, and more. And I can't remember what company had a list, but it was long of the studios that Microsoft wanted to acquire. It was really big. But Sega was funny. Sega's on here. Sega had to come out once this came to light. Sega had to come out and was like, yeah, Sega's not for sale. After all this, which is funny. The last few years have seen the gaming industry's biggest players go on an acquisition spree. This is very true. We've seen Sony acquire Bungie, Microsoft acquire Bethesda, and a lot more. But in court documents, we've learned that Microsoft had plans for some big name transactions that didn't end up happening. Namely, Microsoft had conversations about acquiring Sega, Square Enix, Zynga, and even Bungie before Sony bought them. But Microsoft's ambitions went well beyond these big players. Internal documents reveal at least 100 developers Microsoft considered at one point, before narrowing it down to 8 final candidates. This list included Hades developer Supergiant Games, Pokemon Go's Niantic, I hope I pronounced it right, and IO Interactive, and more. AAA Sony games cost $200 million plus to produce. That's crazy. And whenever people say, oh, they're really expensive to make, I've never seen a number put behind it. But this right here, $200 million, that is a blockbuster movie. That's high. I want to say one of Disney's movies, what is it? Strange World or something like that. It was like $130 million or $180 million to make. This is nuts. This is crazy. We've always known modern AAA video games cost a ton of money to make, but now we have a good idea of just how expensive some of these games are. In a poorly redacted document submitted by Sony Interactive Entertainment, excuse me, we learned The Last of Us Part 2 cost $220 million to develop, while Horizon Forbidden West cost $212 million. In the document, PlayStation said the costs are justified because AAA games create deep and ongoing engagements with players. And those are some of The Last of Us Part 2 is definitely controversial, but people love that game. It won a game award, In Forbidden West, same thing. These are critically acclaimed games. These costs give more context to recent comments from Xbox Game Studios' Matt Booty, who said big budget AAA games cost a half decade or more to make, and failure can potentially ruin the studio. This is true. With Xbox, they have Microsoft backing them. It's a $2 trillion with a T dollar company, so they do have the resources to kind of prop up their gaming part of their business. So it's not as detrimental as, let's say, someone like Sony, who's worth I want to say 150 billion, if I'm not mistaken. Something like that could, if they keep making flops, it could ruin Sony's business. But Xbox, they don't have that big of a, they don't have to worry about that as much. Call of Duty is in fact worth a lot of money. No one is saying that it's not. My argument is that Call of Duty won't make or break Sony. That's not the only game that Sony sells, and I would say that I don't think if Call of Duty wasn't on PlayStation, sure, it would be. It would cost them business, but not as much as they're saying it is. It's not going to break Sony. They'll still keep moving along just fine, in my opinion. Unsurprisingly, Call of Duty was at the center of almost the entire courtroom battle over the last week. Activision's biggest asset came up repeatedly, excuse me, with the FTC raising concerns about exclusivity or the potential of Activision releasing a worse version of Call of Duty on PlayStation. Call of Duty's impact makes sense, given that the same poorly redacted document from Sony revealed that Call of Duty generated over $800 million for PlayStation in the United States alone in 2021, from Phil Spencer testifying under oath that Xbox will keep Call of Duty on PlayStation. The claims that Activision CEO Bobby Kotick threatened to pull Call of Duty from Xbox unless Microsoft granted Activision a higher revenue share. We learned a lot about the value of the franchise to both Sony and Microsoft. I have no more to comment about that. Okay, well, I do a little bit. It generated $800 million. That's nothing to sneeze at. What I would really like to see, though, is what those numbers look like for the rest of their games. And this is something I talked about in my video with the CMA. They were throwing percentages out there, but they were only targeting Call of Duty players on PlayStation. So, throughout those numbers, what I would like to see is how it affects the company as a whole. You know what I mean? How much of that is it? 1%, 2%, 10% of their business? Unless they throw out, that kind of information, that's just a number to me. That means nothing. Jim Ryan doesn't think Starfield's exclusivity is anti-competitive and says PlayStation will be fine. PlayStation boss Jim Ryan made it very clear that he's not a fan of Starfield's Xbox exclusivity. That being said, he admitted he doesn't think it's anti-competitive. Publicly, PlayStation has been the biggest opponent of the Microsoft Activision merger, but privately, it's been a bit of a different story. In an email sent after Microsoft announced its intent to acquire Activision Blizzard, Ryan wrote, I'm pretty sure we will continue to see Call of Duty on PlayStation for many years to come, expressing that PlayStation would be more than okay if the transaction was approved. And I haven't seen anything that's confirmed this, but I would go back to when he was on the call where he said that he doesn't care if Call of Duty is, PlayStation doesn't get another Call of Duty game. He just wants to squash the acquisition. So this kind of runs through the same vein of that. Starfield almost skipped Xbox entirely, which, it's going to be an Xbox exclusive. So I thought this was really interesting. Starfield is coming out this September as an Xbox exclusive, but that wasn't always going to be the case. Xbox boss Phil Spencer confirmed that Starfield was potentially going to skip Xbox entirely prior to Microsoft's acquisition of ZeniMax. Xbox was worried about losing out on Starfield following PlayStation's exclusivity deals for Bethesda games like Ghostwire Tokyo and Deathloop. Spencer said Microsoft had to secure content for Xbox to remain viable in the business. Xbox did so by acquiring ZeniMax altogether, looking down Starfield as an Xbox exclusive. My thing about this whole thing about the exclusives and everything like that, in my opinion, that's been Sony's strategy to move Xbox out of the business, out of the gaming industry. Tiny little cuts, exclusive here, exclusive there. Sony has a real talent about spotting industry studios that make really good games. And I would say Xbox, they don't possess that same talent. And so they've been kind of on the back foot on everything that's come out when it comes to exclusives and Xboxes. And I don't think they're trying to take Sony out of the industry. I just think they're trying to make themselves bigger. So in my opinion, it really seems like Sony is the one who's the nefarious party in all this. Xbox just want to become more relevant in the gaming industry. Sony, I think, wants them out, altogether. But what I thought was kind of funny is the different strategies. So Xbox, decides to get these big studios and publishers so that they can become more relevant in the gaming industry. But that's just me. This is really interesting stuff. Let me know what you think about all that in the comments. Leave a like if you enjoyed the video, and don't forget to subscribe. I'll see you in the next one. But until then, keep it casual. Peace.